Florida State football has decided to keep Mike Norvell heading into the 2026 season. And after the last two seasons, it seems like a lot of Florida State fans are not happy about that. But I'm going to make the case today as to why FSU should keep Mike Norvell around for at least the next season. First, we need a little bit of context. Let's talk about Norvell as a whole. He began his head coaching career at Memphis for about 3 seasons. He went 38-15 at that time in Memphis, won a conference championship in 2019. That was a 12-1 season, I believe. He took the FSU job in late December of 2019. And since he's been at Florida State coaching from the 2020 season and on, he's 38-34, 22-26 in the ACC at FSU. But the most probably popular season of his career was a 13-1 year in 2023. They were 13-0, won the ACC championship, but missed out on the college football playoffs because Jordan Travis had a brutal leg injury against North Alabama. It was the 11th game of the season. They just had 2 more to go. Jordan Travis really derided his career going forward, never got a real chance in the NFL, and he obviously never came back for the rest of this FSU season. So Florida State goes undefeated. They get snubbed from the college football playoffs, and it looks like the committee made the right choice because at the time, with FSU missing Travis and missing the playoffs, a ton of Florida State players, including guys like Jared Verse, opted out of the bowl game that year against Georgia, and I believe that score ended up being like 63-7. So really notable season there for Norvell. He comes out the next season. Florida State was ranked in the top 10, and they dropped their first game to Georgia Tech. This is the 2024 season. And since then, it's been downhill. Florida State in the last 2 seasons is 7-17. They are 3-13 in the ACC. Some mystifying losses in there as well. Not to mention the fact that Florida State started off 3-0 this year. They beat Alabama at home to start the year. And after a 3-0 start, they were ranked, I believe, in the top 15 of college football. People thought that they were going to run the ACC, and then they go out and lose to, I believe, Virginia in an upset road loss. Now, looking back at that one, you see Virginia ends up winning the ACC, but overall this year, 2-6 in the ACC, an unacceptable record for, probably the best, maybe second best job in the ACC. The only one that's arguable right now is Miami. Outside of that, there's just no way you could argue another ACC job is better right here, right now. Maybe some people argue Clemson, but I personally just don't see it. But anyways, a very disappointing year to say the least for Florida State. However, Florida State's athletic director, the administration has announced he's going to come back for 2026. And that's pretty mystifying if you're a Florida State fan, considering the record over the last 2 years. Everybody kind of thinks that he was a one-hit wonder in 2023, but the 2022 season was pretty successful as well. They went 10-3. They weren't in playoff conversations, but that's still a very good year for a Power 4 conference. But let's talk about over the entirety of Norvell's time in Florida State. Let's talk about what's went right and what's gone wrong, and then the case to why he should remain the coach at Florida State for now. So for starters, what went right? Well, from 2021 to 2023, Florida State hit so many different times in the transfer portal. And when I say hit, I mean they went out and got a player off the portal, and that player ended up turning into an NFL caliber, maybe not superstar, but an NFL caliber player. Jermaine Johnson, Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, Keon Coleman, Braden Fisk, and Daryl Jackson Jr., all guys of note, either through the 2023, 2024, 2025, or this upcoming draft class in 2026. I was very surprised to see this many names on Florida State's transfer portal in just 2 seasons. Now, this isn't counting a bunch of other guys that ended up becoming starters for Florida State and had notable careers with the Seminoles. These are just guys that either will or already are in the NFL. So I am really intrigued by what Florida State's strategy is. It seems that they're extremely transfer portal heavy. The recruiting classes, on the other hand, let's talk about what went wrong. We'll first start with the recruiting class or the recruiting classes. From 2020 to 2025, Florida State has recruited 58 4-stars and 1 5-star. And really, none of them have panned out to finish their careers at Florida State. Patrick Payton was a high-end recruit in the 2021 class. He ends up transferring to LSU. Shaheem Brown is the one guy who really has panned out for Florida State throughout his career with the Seminoles. He might be coming back for the next season if he can retain another year of eligibility from the 2022 class, I believe. But these other guys, maybe outside of Shamar Arno, who was a true freshman starter this year for FSU, these other guys like Hakeem Williams just did not pan out. Like I said, 58 4-stars, and there are only 5 or 6 of them of note. The rest of them have either fallen deep on the FSU depth chart or have transferred out over the last couple of seasons. Next up, what went wrong is the 2024 and 2025 transfer portal did not hit like the 3 years prior. You know, they go out in the transfer portal last season. They get DJ Uiagalelei, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, from Oregon State, previously from Clemson. He had a resurgence to his career at Oregon State. He comes to Florida State and is extremely disappointing, to say the least, not to mention injured. Malik Benson, Roydell Williams, TJ Ferguson, they go get these guys from Alabama. I believe outside of Roydell Williams, Malik Benson and TJ Ferguson transferred out. Ferguson now plays at Syracuse, and Benson went on to Oregon and has had a decent season so far. I mean, he's had a few injuries as well, but not to mention the last, but certainly not least, probably the highest caliber player that they've gotten out of the portal the last couple of years, Tommy Castellanos. This guy had a great game versus Alabama, but looking at the rest of the college football season, it was middling to say the best, but I don't know if I could put that on him. He had a few games where he kind of carried the load and the other FSU players on offense just didn't follow through. So looking at where FSU sits, right, it seems that what has gone disastrously wrong is the lack of player development and the lack of hitting in the portal. The player development issue has caused a lot of players to transfer out. Let's take a look from 21 to 25. You see transfers in and transfers out. 12, 14, 12, 17, 23. Those are the transfers in. The transfers out, 17, 28, 22, 22, 33. So over 125 total transfers out and less than 100 transfers in. This means you have to make up the difference through your recruiting classes. And like I said, from the 58 4-stars that they've recruited, there have only been 5 or 6 that have really panned out as future NFL draft prospects, which for Florida State is what you need to succeed. Now, a couple of bright spots for Florida State this season, Deuce Robinson being one of those, Earl Little being another. These are NFL caliber players, and I'm actually going to talk about them in just a little bit, but outside of that, man, Florida State has just really struggled. Not to mention they've had a few coaching changes. Gus Malzahn comes in to be the offensive coordinator. Early on in the season, it looked like that was going to pan out, but as the season went on, we kind of see the typical Gus Malzahn offensive plan sputter out, and there's not really a lot of adjustment being made there. So there's just been a lot of things going wrong for Florida State. However, with all of these things going wrong, Florida State and the administration there decide to retain him. And let me tell you why. Number one, there were a ton of coaching hires that were made this offseason. LSU, Penn State, Auburn, Florida, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, Kentucky. Florida State, in terms of supply and demand, did not want to compete with a ton of other schools for, in my opinion, a low supply of top-tier head coaches. Not to mention, they save millions of dollars in buyout money by keeping Norvell. And this is a Florida State team where I think some of the donations and NIL money is going to peel back just a little bit. After two very disappointing seasons, it's hard to get the boosters back up and say, don't worry, guys, year 3 after 2 setback seasons is going to be better. Now, there was a little bit of momentum to be had from a 2-10 going into a 5-7 season, but overall, I don't think there's much to write home about with Florida State. The other couple of reasons is Norvell could solve this with solving their quarterback problem. Now, of course, you have Jordan Travis, who had a tremendous 2022 and 2023 seasons. However, neither of those years did he eclipse 3,000 total passing yards. That's a little worrisome. Florida State, in my opinion, has really struggled to find their replacement quarterback ever since Jameis Winston left for the NFL back in 2015. So I think hitting on a quarterback would speak volumes to how much better this Florida State team could be. I think there is requisite talent around this roster. Like I already mentioned, Earl Little, Deuce Robinson. If they could figure out how to hit in the portal a couple times, especially at quarterback, or quite frankly, retain Tommy Castellanos. 2 years in this system with a lot of experience under his belt. Gus Malzahn actually loves Tommy Castellanos. He's the whole reason that Castellanos is there. That could be big positives going into the 2026 season. Next up, you have the ACC is unbelievably weak. Miami has had a good year, 10-2 with a couple of tough losses to Louisville and SMU. They'll probably be a little bit better next season with a couple of their young guys like Malachi Toney continuing to develop, but they still have to solve a quarterback issue. But look at the rest of the ACC. Dabo and Clemson have fallen apart. Virginia was the number 1 team, regular season champs in the ACC this year. Duke didn't have a great year, even though they won the ACC championship. Actually, that's the prime example for trying to understand where the ACC sits. A 5-loss Duke was the ACC champion this season. Florida State can absolutely suck up the power vacuum suck up with the power vacuum that's going on in the ACC. I definitely think that there could be a top-tier contender if somehow they hit in this portal class like they did in 2022 and 2023. So, Norvell, in my opinion, gets one more year. It's probably because of the supply and demand of coaching jobs available versus coaches that are worthy of this job being really low. He has a chance to surprise some people. I think a 9-3 season could retain his job for 2027. But once again, I don't know if this is a winning strategy. Like I said, look at these numbers. When you have damn near close to 50% more transfers out than transfers in, you have to fill that gap with something. And in my opinion, that gap has to be filled by developing recruits. And Florida State has yet to do that. They've had a couple of bright spot freshmen like Shamar Arno that is starting at corner, I believe, for Florida State. But outside of that, there's really not a lot going on there in terms of true freshmen performing at a high level as of right now. So Florida State has got to figure out how to solve this issue. Retain the talent on your roster and go out and get more in the transfer portal. So strategies going forward. Number 1, you got to hit the transfer portal hard. The freshman class is not going to be able to fill the shoes of a lot of talent that could potentially be leaving. So you're going to have to hit the portal hard, which means you need NIL dollars. I know Tommy Castellanos is out of eligibility. I believe he's fighting for it right now. If there is any possible way to retain Castellanos into year 2, that would be massive. If not, once again, you'll have to hit the portal hard for a quarterback. I really don't know which quarterbacks are going to be out there. Jackson Arnold could be a bargain deal with Gus Malzahn. Maybe that's a system worthy of testing out, especially if you're Mike Norvell. the chips are all getting pushed to the middle in 2026. You know that your job is basically 1 or 2 losses away from being taken away from you. So as far as the transfer portal goes, Mike Norvell is going to have to nail it this offseason. Next up, you got to get the draft class or the draft talent that you have on your roster, like Deuce Robinson, like Earl Little. You have to get them to come back. I believe in 2022, there were several players that could have gone to the NFL that decided to come back, like Jared Verse. He was one of those senior leaders, along with Braden Fisk coming in the portal that 2023 season. If you can get those players back to be vocal leaders in the locker room, to buy into the system, that provides a ton of locker room support for your coaching staff. You need that more than ever in 2025, 2026. Last but certainly not least, Deion Sanders, is an FSU legend there. And there were a lot of rumors that he could have potentially been the coach a few years ago before Mike Norvell was hired. I believe Deion took that as kind of a slight, and he's upset with Florida State. But I guarantee you, with Deion's job potentially being on the line next year, Florida State would love to give him a call and say, come on over to FSU. We'll provide you with millions of more dollars than Colorado does. I mean, look, Deion Sanders and Colorado have not had a couple of good years. Now, they did have one with Shador and Travis Hunter last season, but overall, Deion still has a losing record at Colorado. If he can somehow turn around the program next season and go 7-5, maybe 8-4, FSU will be assuredly giving him a call if Mike Norvell cannot turn this team around. Now, last but certainly not least, a part of FSU's strategy is they got to hope for a surprise. This Florida State team does not have a lot of promise going into next season. The ACC, like I said, is still weak, but Florida State seems to be damn near the bottom of the barrel right now. They're on the same playing field in terms of records as Wake Forest and NC State, and that's just unacceptable. As a Florida State fan, in my opinion, I'm not a Florida State fan, but if I was one, I would be unbelievably pissed with the current state of the program. Mike Norvell is on an extremely short leash, but I do think it was the right decision. It seems like when he has lightning in a bottle, he can truly capture it, and that's unbelievably important, trying to retain relevance in the modern world of college football. When you think of major college football blue bloods, you think Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia, even Miami. I would start to think Florida above Florida State. You cannot be the third best school in your state and be relevant in the college football realm. FSU is going to have to figure out how to retain their dominance over the conference and, quite frankly, their dominance over the state of Florida. If I was FSU, I would be circling the Florida game and the Miami game on your schedule next year or even the next and say we must win those to win over this Florida recruiting class because it's unbelievably rich. But that being said, that's what I've got for you on Florida State. I think it was the right move to keep Mike Norvell for right now. I obviously would not be surprised if by week 3 or week 4, kind of like Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, Mike Norvell gets fired after a couple disappointing losses. But if somehow they can retain the positivity that they had in 2023, then absolutely Norvell and this Florida State team will make noise next year. I saw a lot of people rumoring that the current FSU football roster is mocking Norvell, saying, after a loss that they've got to re-up and respond. And I think you've got to get that stuff out of your locker room in 2026, or else this will go sour quickly. So with that being said, thank you guys all so much for watching. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe button, and we will see you next time.